You're listening to Grind Less, Flow More. It is Sunday, May 18th, 2008, and you're facing a moment of truth. Dan, take us there.
It's 2 p.m. I just got back from the office where I spent most of my Sundays working on kind of processing the inbox of mail and, email backlogs and just trying to get caught up before the week. And I come home and walk in my house and I find my fiance crying in the kitchen. And when I walk up, she just stops me from coming any closer and just says, "I can't do this anymore," and takes the ring off her hand and finger and just drops it on the counter and just walks right out the house. I didn't even try to stop her. I just knew she was done. And I thought maybe I could, make amends after the fact. I just knew in that moment she was done. It had not been the first time that we had this conversation, and I just realized, that was 7 weeks before our marriage, wedding day, and I don't know. I had this moment of, a year prior I became a millionaire, so financially I was, on the right track. Business, won the awards. And I just had this deep sense of failure because how am I so blind that I can be successful in one area of my life in business, quote unquote business, and be a complete, imbecile when it comes to relationships. And it extended past just my fiance. I mean, my friends would tell me the same thing. My brothers, my family members, I was just all consumed and didn't understand how I was showing up for other people. And that was the moment where I knew I wasn't going to stop creating in this world, but I had to find a different way to do it.
It's powerful. I mean, there's nothing more tangible than a moment like that where it actually happens, and it's I mean, you're in a state of shock, but then it's about, okay, well, what's the action now that this has happened? And there's a lot of new parent founders actually that we talk to, and they're actually really frightened. And this is kind of I guess, a bit forward in time. They get married, now they have a kid. And imagine that happening when you have a child, right? That's even higher stakes. So for the founders out there who are, in relationships, want to be in relationships, going to have a kid, I mean, how do you start to balance out your time between family and your startup, especially in that moment? Was there an action plan you wrote? Did it take time to process? I mean, any way you want to approach that question would be, immensely valuable.
Yeah, it took a while. What I didn't realize is how much, because it was crazy, because it was 6 months after the fact that I ended up selling my company. So not only had my identity been tied up in this relationship I had been in for years, all our, friend groups and, people knew her and us together. Then I exit my company and I negotiated essentially a 0-day earnout. So I only had to stay on for 6 months in an advisory role. So I was waking up with no demand on my time, nobody to share this newfound wealth, this life. And I just thought, this can't be success. So, initially I turned to therapy because I had some serious, anxiety and identity challenges around that. And then I went on this journey of just betterment for what it means to be a great partner and also be a great friend and create boundaries. And I mean, this went on for probably 3 or 4 years. I shortly thereafter, I moved to San Francisco. I grew up in a small town in Eastern Canada. And while I was there is really when I kind of started to see, honestly, just got exposed to even different ways companies are built, the way people leverage relationships and capital and look for leverage. That was the big thing where I was like, oh, the way they build companies is completely different. And and because I had obviously access to resources, I just started asking myself, like, what are the things that only I can do, and what are things that I can hire other people to do, so that I spend a higher percentage of my time in that place, and also make time for myself, my health, my relationships, friends. But yeah, there was no clear thing other than um, knowing that I was never going to stop building. I'm a creator, but I needed to find a completely different way to build and create, or I would forever be plagued with this reality that I was going to be single and honestly just not fulfilled.
Mm-hmm. I mean, definitely. I mean, they say it's lonely at the top. You were lonely at the top. It's like, okay, the saying is true. I now feel it. I haven't just heard it. I feel it. And now it's about, it's about creating systems. I mean, relationship systems even. I know that's the word people don't like to associate relationships, but you've got to organize your time in a way that gives you freedom, in the way that really gives you joy when you make it, whatever making it is defined for you. And I mean, you have an incredible new book that's out. It's Buy Back Your Time. And it sounds like a key part of this process and what's in the book is about around delegating and deleting. I mean, those are big topics that are very hard for entrepreneurs to grasp and let go, especially if they want to have quality of life balance with their finances. So, as an entrepreneur, where do you start? Where did you start as you started your journey?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to take 4 years, you could do it the way I did it. But what happened was, you know, once I figured out, like, entrepreneurs, if they don't learn this strategy, then what happens is they'll hit this thing called the pain line. And the pain line is essentially, the more I grow, the more pain and chaos comes into my life. So I won't grow. Like, no entrepreneur will grow into pain. So, and usually at that point, they'll either sell, sabotage, or stall. Those are the three S's of the pain line. And where I always start is a time and energy audit, right? Just like if I was trying to be healthy, a good fitness coach would have you log all the food you've eaten in a week, and then kind of from that data set figure out like what's hurting and what's helping. Time and energy audit for me is the same thing, because if you don't try to systematically increase the amount of activities that give you energy, reduce the ones that suck your energy, and then also look at like a better way of getting leverage with your dollar. So like businesses hire people, they're spending dollars on labor. And my philosophy is they just do it in the wrong order, and sequencing equals success. If you sequence the order, you know, it's like baking a cake, right? If I give you the ingredients and you don't follow the recipe in the wrong sequence, then your cake can either look like this beautiful birthday cake or a big pile of muck. So for me, it's about understanding the value of your time, what I call the buyback rate. So this is a mathematical equation. That's why the buyback principle is a first principle. And the philosophy is that you don't hire to grow your business, you hire to buy back your time, right? It's calendar over capacity. Now, typically when an entrepreneur follows the buyback loop, that calendar time results in a higher output that makes them more money. Not always true. It definitely doesn't work the other way if you just hire for capacity in your business and you don't have a strategy for doing that. But the reality of it is that $10 million companies were not built off $10 tasks. And if you're doing anything that you could pay somebody else to do that's a fourth of the income that you make in your business, then it's just not a good time trade, right? And if you don't learn that skill set of leveraging your time, then you'll always be maxed out. There's just a capacity. It's just pure math that, there's only so many hours, and the person that can get the most leverage is going to be able to produce more. And when you optimize for energy and value, that's why I use that word specifically, that's how you create a life that you don't have to retire from, right? And a future that is compelling. And the more you grow, the better your life gets, not the opposite.
Couldn't agree more. Let's put this into a bit of like a use case. So I'm a founder. I'm like, yes, there are moments that I'm at better peak performance throughout the day. I kind of know, but this is interesting. I'm going to actually commit to logging this for a day or a week, a certain amount of
Two
time.
weeks. Yeah.
2 weeks. Okay. So 2 week thing. Um, I'm going to write, I've got a piece of paper. I'm going to write down a few columns. What's the play by play on what I'm tracking and how often am I tracking whatever I have to track?
Yeah, essentially every 15 minutes you write down exactly what you did for the previous 15 minutes. You do that for 2 weeks, right? That because that takes care of like, travel or distortion, like something usually there's some level of pattern in a 2 week period. And I do this myself probably every 6 months. I do it with my clients as soon as I start working with them. I mean, this is a high performance activity that most top performers do in all aspects of life. Then we look at, we highlight in green everything that gives you energy and anything in red that takes your energy. And then that shifts, right? Like when you're into something new and you're creating this new habit and the skill set, you're all about it. But eventually you're like, hey, I don't really want to, do these videos anymore or run the product meeting or whatever it is. And then for each task, you also write down a dollar value, right? What would it cost to have somebody else do that task? Is it $1 to $4, right? And it's kind of like, Google's like how expensive a restaurant is. It's like it's subjective to the individual, but usually, yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4. Four is stuff that like, only you could kind of do like CEOing type stuff. And one is like administrative stuff, right? And then everything in between. And then you grab all the red stuff with $1 ratings and you put them in a bucket and you look at it and you go, okay, what does this person look like? And, a lot of people think like I can only hire somebody who does this one thing. What I've discovered is, just like every person listening to this, we wear multiple hats in business. You can hire somebody that wears multiple hats. Like my early assistants process my mail, post it on social media, did accounts receivable, book, like they did multiple different things. So you can call that, a virtual assistant, a executive assistant, an office manager, a house manager, whatever it is. It's anybody that takes care of the noise around the work so that you can then redeploy that time into higher value activities that create more energy. And then from that, we also do a perfect week design, right? Because I believe in energy management, not time management. So even within the construct of like, what does a perfect week look like for me? That also creates boundaries and constraints for you to then place elements and projects inside of and create a rhythm that builds upon itself so that you get into that flow state and that you produce at a higher level. And then you honor the calendar because the truth is as much as I teach this stuff, I also know that a lot of people have some very bad habits and belief sets that are actually probably, if not the most time consuming aspect of their week, is just themselves and their psychology getting in the way from them producing.
Couldn't agree more. And yeah, something we found for our first season is people need to get out of their own way. I mean, I bet you most of our entrepreneurs have heard what you said in one way or another, but how many of them are actually acting? Because it's a lot of work. You really have to like zoom out. You've got to like set up this perfect, 2 weeks thing. You've got to like set reminders on your phone to actually do it. Like it gets a lot of work. So I feel like they have to eventually like to take action. There's got to be some kind of a catalyst. Usually it's coaching. Usually it's investing in something, of course. But in terms of like what holds people back the most, actually starting to let go of things, what do you find from like, the hundreds of SaaS founders you've worked with? What is kind of like that first blocker that you feel like once they get through that, then they get on a roll? Like what's that first domino? If you could maybe pinpoint something.
That nobody else can do it as good as me. And my response to that is a few things. One, you know, $10 task, like you can't do that if you have aspirations to grow. Like $10 million companies are not built off $10 tasks. So if you know that to be true, then it's a forcing function to get it off your plate. So it's not an option anymore. It's a necessity. And then it's, this other belief I have, which is 80% done by somebody else is 100% freaking awesome, right? Even if they only do it at 80%, you got that hour back. You got that 5 hours back to then go to the gym, spend time with your kids, your wife, whatever it is that you want to fill that time with I always suggest in my buyback loop framework to reinvest that time into high value producing activities to generate more resources. Like, I'm not a fan of people that like 4-hour work week it to go hang out on a beach. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like build the capacity and and business by taking low value, low energy type activities out of your calendar so that you can go reinvest it, right? Don't not work, but when you work, have it produce high amounts of income. And then it's really just about showing them a framework to get stuff off their plate. I mean, most people, like, one of the fill aspects is a skill set. Like, no matter where you're at, if you want more, you got to become more. And to become more, you probably need to learn a new skill. And learning how to delegate in an efficient and clean manner is a skill. And once I show them my framework, which I call the Camcorder Method, usually they're like, oh man, that's so much easier than when I've been thinking about it, right? Most people fail because they don't properly train, set expectations, monitor, set up the system, so that the task gets done. Again, even if it's at 80% of what you were doing at least it gets done consistently every time so that you can then clear that mental space to go focus on higher creative endeavors.
Yeah, and that's basically don't be a perfectionist, right? Reid
Oh,
Hoffman quote.
perfectionist is procrastination disguised.
Totally. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, no, and especially like product focused founders, a lot of them are people that we work with that are on our podcast are very like about like, yes, MVP, but also they're just like super just detail oriented. And that can of course be a curse if you don't know what's good enough versus trying to again be perfect or procrastinate. So I love that mindset and those points. Now around 4 hour work week, very quickly, it's probably the most quoted book on our podcast for the obvious reason that people want to better leverage their time. One metric that I personally use for myself, which ties into the whole like auditing your time, is the concept of relative income. How do you maximize your dollar per hour? How do you either increase the numerator, and that's income, or let's say profit, and decrease the denominator, time it takes you to, like, so in a month, what is your relative income? What are your thoughts around that metric? Do you think hyper focusing on that has any kind of blind spots to it perils, or is that just another way of framing what you kind of tell people along at have high leverage activities?
Yeah, in the book I talk about this idea of called the value creation score, which is very similar, right? Except I don't really talk much about the relative income of the hours worked per se, because in my world I don't assume people are working more than 60 hours a week. If have to be, typically 40 or 35 or whatever they feel is appropriate. But there's no denying that every individual can easily measure their ability to create value in the world by looking at the income that they generated, profit, right? And I always say it's the money you pay yourself, the profit from the business, or any discretionary expenses you put through the business that probably shouldn't be there. Like, that's the value creation. So my value creation score is completely different than Jeff Bezos's or Elon Musk, right? But it's a great feedback loop to tell you on an annual basis if you're getting better, right? If you're waking up every day with an intention of betterment, then that feedback loop and that math is a clear way of doing it. And then what I teach in the book, the reason why I get them to that number is because then we talk about the buyback rate, which is whatever that number is per hour divided by, I say 2,000 because that's the amount of hours in a year, and then take that number because I want you to get a 4x ROI on your time, divided by 4 again. So technically shorthand is 8,000, longhand is 2,000. That's the amount of hours per year. So sorry, if you have the annual or the hourly value, the relative income, then that's then divided by 4. That is your buyback rate, to then look at all the activities in your life that you can get somebody else to do to support you, so that you can then trade that time up. I mean, that's the when I remember reading the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, and like, it's all about time trades, right? Like, when you're an employee, you trade your time for income. When you're an entrepreneur, you trade um, your income for time, right? If you do it right, and then as an investor, as you build your empire, you start trading your income for income, right? You make your money work for you, and that's the skill set that I'm trying to teach in this book to help every entrepreneur get better at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so important. And the way I've like been thinking about it recently, very aligned with this, is that you're spending calories on making money. And eventually can you make money spending less calories, which is a fancy way of saying residual income, which isn't just off real estate. It can be off the residual income coming from staff that are working while you sleep or working while you work on high value activities. So I think like that's very important. And that's where we define the grind is maybe not actually being true to that. And when someone says I'm grinding, are you grinding on the right things? Is it a worthwhile grind or a futile grind? So, I mean, question to you, and maybe we can hit a different angle of the book is what do you define as the work grind, and where do you think your founders and CEOs just work too hard instead of smart?
Yeah, I mean, to me, if you don't have a deliberate outcome of replacing yourself, then you're grinding, right? So you need to begin with the end in mind, which is, Covey, 7 Habits, highly effective people. But in the book, I actually teach this framework called the replacement ladder, and there's 5 levels to it. And I'll give you the short version, but like level 1 is administrative stuff, right? Like you cannot do administrative stuff and be the CEO of a company and continue to elevate, right? Level 2 is delivery. Whatever the thing you do once you sell somebody, having somebody support you on that. It could be on onboarding, support, or whatever. Some organizations, we call that customer success. That's on the delivery side. Then level 3 is marketing, right? So like, what is your system for producing marketing qualified leads, demand for your business? Level 4 is sales. How do you take that demand, convert it into customers? And then level 5 is leadership, right? What I talk about the executive leadership team, and each one of those in the book, I'm very specific what it means to actually like graduate to the next level. So for example, on the administrative assistant, if you don't have your exec admin managing 100% of your emails and your calendar, I'm talking about like you do not do first filter on emails and you do not put stuff in your calendar, then you're not doing it right. And you're not getting the amount of leverage from that level. So you're not going to buy back as much time as you think. And time sometimes is headspace and energy as well. So I'm very clear about how that looks and how that works for each one of the levels, so that they can really get true freedom. Because the cool part is, if once you get to level 4, you get what you just talked about, that residual income. When you have somebody else marketing to generate demand, somebody else closing to get the customer, and somebody else delivering to deliver on what you sold, then you literally have a business that makes money while you sleep, that you can then now start to play kind of like creator and expander, and you remove yourself from working in the business to on the business.
Beautiful. One thing, especially when I talk to even like realtors, people in professional services, consultants, when like you are the product, so they're like, I can't have someone else deliver what I'm doing. And obviously, there's a caveat to what you said. If you're like you are the product, well, that's the business model you've chosen, and there's nothing wrong with it. You just got to make sure you work with the right clients and it's high value work. But I mean, a lot of people want to start as a service and then productize. Right? How do I productize myself? I mean, you've actually kind of done that through your business. Maybe it's something you can talk about. So, in terms of someone productizing themselves, in other words, letting go, in other words, not doing all the delivery and not being scared to piss off customers, what's been your process to scale yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I literally use the time and energy audit, and then look at what needs to be taken out of my calendar, and then getting creative on the transfer phase of the buyback loop, right? So like once I audit time and energy, then it's transfer. So for example, I'm a coach and people hire me as a coach. That's SaaS Academy. Well, eventually Dan is no longer available. SaaS Academy exists, but we have coaches. So then who are the coaches? Well, there are SaaS companies that Dan's coached that have exited, that are in the program and available. So it's like, those are problems to be solved. You just got to force the conversation and the decision, right? So if I'm a real estate agent, and I'm getting demand, and I'm now at the capacity point. See, this is why sequencing matters. If I'm at the point where I'm capped on the amount of clients I can serve, and when I do my time and energy audit, I've bought back all the lower level rungs in the replacement ladder, then it's okay. Now I need to hire somebody to also sell real estate, but they work for me. I've trained them on my methodology and system. So yes, somebody came for me, but I'm going to introduce them to my associate. And that is actually how real estate teams typically work. So this is not a new method. Every business in the world has scaled even when the founder started that company. And I think too often entrepreneurs think they're, this like fingerprint uniqueness or magical, snowflake, and they're just not. Like there's no business, including coaching, including, create. I talk about Andy Warhol, the famous artist, in my book, because he literally is one of the most prolific artists, and he created a factory. It was called The Factory, on how he produced artwork. Tom Clancy, same thing on books. So these are highly artistic, creative works that nobody would ever assume you could, have support on, and you'd always have to be the person. And it turns out that's not the case. You essentially chunk up the activities into very specific, individualized kind of work pieces, and then your genius is creating the process and system around it to get the output. People buy the solution to the problem. They don't buy the person. They just trust that the person can give them a solution. So if you're the designer and I want a logo, I don't care if you design it or somebody else does it. I just want the logo quality that I'm assuming I'm going to get because I saw your work. So as long as that's true, I don't have a problem. So people think, well, I don't want to piss off the customer. The customer doesn't care as long as you deliver on what you promised, right? And ideally over deliver. And those are all things that are up to the CEO and the entrepreneur to design, create, and use as a problem to solve, which is super fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, exactly. It's something that,
But I've done this so many ways, Paul. Like, well, how do you create content? I have a researcher go and do research, put together the content. I still shoot the videos, but I didn't have to put the content together. How does your new growth playbooks you guys release every month inside of SaaS Academy get created? I hired a product manager. They interview our top clients. They find out what's working best in the market. They reverse engineer what they're doing. They create a beta. They test it with 15 other clients. They try to replicate the results. Once they replicate the results, then they deploy it into the other clients. One of our coaches teaches the framework. There's a solution to everything that people think is special if they're willing to learn the skill set of reverse engineering what it is and then building a system and process around it.
definitely. And one thing that I'm also garnering from that is that, like, just the micro of your every, like, let's say you're planning the day, but you have the vision of all the departments and everything you're doing. So, for example, like when you are working with clients, you're thinking about the insights to make the customer experience better. You're thinking of potential marketing material. You're taking words out of their mouth and maybe thinking about your next landing page. It's kind of like, I feel like a lot of owners, the reason why they don't get around to the important but not urgent and things that are not in their comfort zone, because then they're in the inertia and the comfort zone of like just working on product, or a sales founder just working on sales, and they partition things. This is also more mental energy, but there's a way for everything to flow together if you have the vision of, this customer meeting is me doing customer discovery, I'm working on my sales landing page, I'm working on product development, I'm working on all these other departments, like back of mind, and you're almost like asking certain questions with the like bigger vision of the whole, I guess, flow of it. So question to you is, in terms of having things flow into each other and having that vision on a daily basis, is there a way that you think a founder who's, let's say, doing quarterly, yearly planning can like do an audit on like everything, all the activities happening in the business, and which ones can kind of, I guess, flow into each other, so that when they're in the micro of talking to a client, talking to the team, doing research, reading something online, they can start to kind of have things flow together, which therefore means it's less work to cover more topics. Is there some kind of methodology you see there?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, my strategy has always been the camcorder method. So I record everything I do. I literally have two cameras recording me right now.
Hmm.
All my meetings are recorded, etc. And a lot of times, the work I'm doing, especially if I'm starting, it's been a while because I have teams now that I execute, right? So like, when I start a company today, literally I start with the CEO and I build around them, and we execute essentially the buyback principle around that individual. But like if I just think of like SaaS Academy 5 years ago, I would record all the creative work in the business, from the sales calls to the marketing strategy to content creation to my coaching calls to everything, because I knew in the future I would have somebody else use that as an artifact to then reverse engineer what I was doing. So as I even processing my emails, right? Like record your screen, talk out loud what you're doing, how you're
Right.
thinking through it,
Of course.
save that in a Dropbox. And then when you hire an executive assistant, have them watch those videos, right? So it like accomplishes so many different things.
Mm.
But like, I recorded all my sales calls because when I hired my first sales guy, Michael, literally the training was spend the next week listening to 50 calls
Sure.
and you create the script. So that was what's crazy is
Hmm.
he had the sales background. I'm kind of like a enthusiastic salesperson, not formally trained. Hired him. He had a sales background, Sandler methodology or whatever. And then he created the playbook based on the things he was hearing me do, but then even made it better by putting it into a system and a methodology. So to me, when we have the recordings, we're able to then say, okay, so those customer interviews, marketing, go look at the last three and then go figure out if there's any campaigns we should be creating. Sales, go listen to their objections and their feedback to us, so that maybe if those come up in a sales conversation, you have the solution. Or product, let's go figure out what the top things that are holding them back from getting results and figure out if we have to change our curriculum in any shape or fashion. So it's like, that's my approach, is knowing that everything I do today at some point in the future, based on the economics and the energy that I talk about, will be used to give to somebody else. I want to give them an example of me doing it so that they can get there a lot faster than me having to sit down and train them.
Yeah, and it's the document, don't create Gary V quote, right? Like it's just document what you do. Now, where I find that may have a challenge is that it's almost easier said than done from the standpoint of people are like, some people are maybe like camera shy and have to get over that, of course. But then it's about like, if you're recording every meeting, you have a crap load of media. You have to remember to put on the Dropbox. You've got to remember to label it. You've got to
Executive
potentially
assistant,
timestamps.
Paul. Executive
Okay, so that's
assistant.
it. Just
Come
dive
on.
in and do it.
Yeah, that's why that's level one.
Yeah,
Literally, my executive assistant
right.
manages all of that.
Okay. So you just dump it in a Dropbox. You're like, hey, and do you have a cadence? You say, hey, every 2 weeks, go do a sprint of what I've done the last 2 weeks, pull out the important things and add it to our playbooks. Or is there any kind of cadence, or is it just like, hey, just real time as I drop things in, just like as I'm like end of day, here's the
It's
task.
all
Yeah.
different. So
Right.
it builds over time. So for
Mm.
example, anytime a really quick system, it's like my content, if you follow me on social, it's all
Totally.
recorded content of me just working, document, not create. Um, my assistant adds my videography team to any calendar invites that will have recordings, but the recording automatically records, and when it's done, it saves it to Dropbox, which notifies them. And then they have a cadence that we've designed for them to process, clip, and publish. Right. So my assistant knows which meetings we've discussed need to be recorded, saved in what locations. Everything else is still saved in Dropbox in the cloud, so that if there is future scenarios that I want to use it, the archive's there. Right. So there's like each recording has a work stream if there's an intended purpose we've already designed. Other than that, it's there in the archive that we can then go and retrieve because it's all in my calendar. So the calendar timestamp kind of tells us when did those conversations happen.
Yeah, I love it. So thanks for the specificity there, because I feel like those are sort of things that some people like until they actually like see it step by step, they're like, yeah, I'll do it eventually, and it just seems a little intimidating and like too much work. It's like the value equation. If of course, Alex Hermosi, and I know you've Layla Hermosi, I guess his partner has done some I guess gave you a testimonial in the book, right?
Yeah,
And
I actually
they're
coached Alex and Layla.
that's amazing. Yeah. So let's talk a bit about them, because they've blown up on the scene. And where I was going at is that they have a whole thing around for someone to do something. There's got to, of course, be value. The likelihood of achievement has to be high, and the effort has to be low. And I think that's something you, of course, have to think about for customers, but also for us. We are customers. We are users. We are a customer. So if something's too much work for us, we're not going to do it, especially when we're inundated. So I guess I'm just always trying to be in touch of how do we make something low effort and properly delegate, which is kind of a full circle of our conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think most people have angst to execute on a project because they don't take the time to break it down. So it's because it's not clear, right? It's that clarity is required. And literally sometimes people, the best thing they could do is just stop and say, I'm going to spend 30 minutes just breaking this down into different pieces. And that's it. I'm not going to work on it. I'm just literally going to just say, okay, what's the outcome? What are the different projects that are sub steps of this thing? And let me just get that clear. And
Is this
once
on
you
a
have,
Word document, on a Asana board? Like what
I
usually,
use
what do you capture
Notion.
in? Use
Yeah,
Notion.
I'm a
Yeah.
Notion guy. You can
Cool.
use anything, but I just
Yeah.
write it down, Google Doc. It's just break
Sure.
it down, right? Like I have a event that I'm producing next year, and there was about like 14 different requests of like speakers and content and all this stuff from different people. And I just told my assistant, like, put all those emails in one spot. And I spent 30 minutes this morning processing those emails, pulling out the different things, writing down, okay, this is a content piece, this is a speaker piece, this is an experience piece, and then now with that, I can go back and say, okay, I'm going to spend, 60 minutes tomorrow doing this. I'm going to take this piece and give it to this person with this timeline. And I just think that a lot of people, they punt or defer things because they don't have clarity around what actually needs to be done. If they had that, then they would just attack it.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. I feel like a part of actually attacking things is sometimes you just have to do it in community or you have to do it with your team. So in terms of like, I guess the way that founders can leverage community, whether it's quality of life experience, I know in Kelowna it's a total playground for mountain biking, for wine tasting, even if you don't drink, etc. Like it's such an environment to actually maybe have fun doing this. How do you leverage community, whether it's with your team or with other entrepreneurs, to, as you said before, learn, upskill, and maybe just enjoy the journey a little more, because we work too hard not to actually make this integrate, make this grind, or even this amazing money machine integrate with our quality of life and our sense to belong.
Well, I'm gonna share, and I'm gonna preface it with, this is not where you start. Okay, this should be something people aspire to. Okay, but for example, I have date night with my wife every Thursday. Every second week, we invite another couple. Okay, so make it dynamic where it's for us, and then a new relationship that we want to invest in. We do Tuesday morning founders hikes every Tuesday, 6:30 a.m. And my buddy Trent Kitch and I have been running this. That's up Knox Mountain. Every Wednesday night is mountain bike night. So all the group in the summertime, we go mountain biking. Sunday ski, and these are all entrepreneurial groups. Okay. Sunday family day out on the hill with all my entrepreneurial friends, Todd Herman, Nick Kuzmich, and a handful of others. We go to the ski hill. Every year I do an annual snowboard trip called Maple Summit with 48 of the world's coolest entrepreneurs at this place called Baldface that I've been doing for 9 years. We do an annual mountain bike trip in September. That's usually about 12 entrepreneurs. We do, just everything. Literally, when I travel, I use physical activities as a way to connect with people I want to invest deeper in a relationship with. And even my coworkers, like right now we're doing a wellness challenge that ends with a 12-hour walk. Okay. It's called a book called The 12-Hour Walk by Colin O'Brady. And that's just like my executive team and our whole team's doing it, but it's optional if they do the 12-hour walk. It's just part of what we do. To me, it's like the people side of business and life is what makes life. It's the juice of life. So if you're grinding by yourself in your office and you don't, like, even last night we had a big dinner with I think we're 22 people. It was 10 couples and 10 people from our unhoused community, essentially homeless people. And like that's a big part of our life. But again, those other 10 couples were entrepreneurs, or the other 5 couples were entrepreneurs. It's just all integrated. It's just,
Mm-hmm.
I heard Scooter Braun called it wasn't integrated life. It was like harmony life or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
where his,
Mm-hmm.
it's like this, you're trying to achieve harmony. There is no balance.
Hmm.
Sometimes things are louder than other things, but over time you create a beautiful symphony.
I love it. Poetic. Yeah. And Scooter Braun, he's so smart. I've heard, when he does any kind of public speaking appearance, like he was at TEDx Conf a few years ago, He is such a wise dude, and he's married to Yael Cohen, who's a UBC gal in Vancouver, West Coaster. So everything's small world, as they say. Love that. Just to wrap up, and I wish we could talk obviously forever. There's lots of things that we've covered. I'm gonna have you give you some rapid fire questions, and that's gonna be our wrap. But actually, before we do that, you did kind of start to tease into contribution, right? Like that specific homeless thing that you talked about. That's awesome. And a lot of my founders, including me, we would love to do that, but mentally it's pre-wired in us. Do that when you make your billions. Once you're Bill Gates, go save the world. In terms of contribution, I mean, do you think founders should just wait for their exit to do more actual community work? Is there a way that you integrate it in terms of building your culture? Like, it's a philosophical sort of thing, but when did you start to really contribute? And do you think at some point it's someone being too altruistic? Like, what's the balance of contributing? That's kind of what we want to do as we, ascend up our Maslow's hierarchy of needs and really have freedom. But is there a way to start? I know it's kind of a open question, but that's a
I'm a
blocker.
person. Yeah, I'm a person of faith.
Mm-hmm.
God, and there's
Mm-hmm.
this concept of tithing. I think there's a lot of reasons why that's that 10% is an interesting place. So it could be, and it really doesn't matter what it is, but like to me, it was ingrained into what I do because I just don't. I believe you can be a great company and do good in the world at the same time. I was inspired by a book called Compassionate Capitalism. Mark Benioff wrote it. Like I implemented this in my third company. Funny enough, that was the one that finally succeeded after two failed companies. So like,
Mm-hmm.
and back then we were doing Kiva. So we were super involved in like sponsoring entrepreneurs around the world as a
Amazing.
company. Anytime
Mm-hmm.
like our clients would have like big wins or celebrations, we'd
Mm-hmm.
always donate to Kiva in their honor.
Mm-hmm.
And I've just continued to just integrate it into my personal life. So like every Friday afternoon is kind of my personal give back time. So I work with at-risk youth. I'm heavily involved in a lot of my friends' kind of community programs. But the truth is like make it part of who you are today, because I really
Mm-hmm.
believe capital and money just amplifies who you are. And if you're somebody that doesn't give back today, I don't care if you have 100 million, you're not going to give back. Like it's just not. It's a
Mm-hmm.
muscle. You have to develop it. It
Yes.
has to be a sacrifice. You have to do things. But like for a long time, I got asked to sit on boards of these nonprofits. And
Mm.
early days, I said yes, and then eventually I said no because I realized my
Right.
time is better leverage for these nonprofits going out and making money
Right.
than
Right.
showing up. I was like, it was
Yes.
literally the buyback principle at its best. It's like
Mm-hmm.
3 hour board meeting or 3 hours in my business. I can make
Mm-hmm.
more money and pay somebody else to go and sit in that board seat and
Yeah.
be one of their number one contributors and donators. So yeah, I just think it's definitely should be part of somebody's DNA. And I think we have so many great examples, these B
Mm-hmm.
corporations, that I don't know, it's just a good energy to bring to work as well.
Totally. No, I love the way you broke that down. To the rapid fire, a person or piece of media you wish you would have learned from earlier to work smarter and not harder.
A tool or just media?
The next question is a tool. So why don't we talk
Okay, so
about
let's
those one
start with
after another?
media. A piece of media learn sooner. The
Or a
E-Myth.
person.
I mean,
The
yeah,
E-Myth.
the E-Myth. Like, I wish I would have read it way sooner than I did. I was
Systems,
23. Yeah,
processes. Yeah.
systems. Yeah.
Love it. A tool. App.
I'm a big fan of this app called Be Focused Pro. It's a Pomodoro timer on
Nice.
my. Yeah, I use
Beaut-
that a lot every day.
Beautiful. One that I use is called the Centered app. Sort of the same thing, but they have flow music and they have a community of people that can kind of hold you accountable. So it's kind of like a different version of that. But yeah, time constraints to flow through the grind is super important. A mental or physical health habit you cannot imagine life without.
There's a program called 75 Hard. It's a mental toughness program,
Mm.
and I'm doing it now. I've done it probably 4 or 5 times, and I'm just really grateful that it was created.
Super important. Looking at my scribbly pad of notes, there's a lot of things we talked about. I mean, tying it back to the beginning of this episode, you got a real big punch to the face on your personal side, and it seems like that was such a wonderful catalyst in a way, and in a way for you to be like, how do I start to integrate quality of life systems with an actual better use of my time in terms of being in a zone of genius, so that I can balance out my relationships, my health, and my highest value activities in a way where I can show up for my relationships. End of the day, you can make as much money as you want, but if you're lonely at the top, you kind of screwed up. So I think like the catalyst of that to, of course, lead towards your, one of the, biggest SaaS coaching companies in the world, and now a book which basically has a large part of the playbook. It's just super cool to see the sequentiality of like life driving you to make money, and how that's integrating back to how you contribute, how you bring people together, and just this general life playbook I think is so awesome, man. So really want to thank you for your time. Excited for this book that we have. It's such a, we'll of course link to it. Dan, this has been awesome. Hope to cross paths again soon, and please keep flowing, and thank you again.
My pleasure. Thanks, Paul.
Okay, brother, take care. Thank you.
Cool. Have a great day.